attachment theory says that children heal when they have attachment to a safe, loving caregiver. And to build attachment starts with building small incremental doses of connection with the child. But when you have a child who's in your home, who's experienced trauma, the way that that manifests is typically through big behaviors.
Well, here we are in the month of May for Foster Care Awareness Month, and we're doing a special shout out to a ministry called Chosen. Chosen was founded by Jenni Lord, and what a gal, what a person to follow and just see what she's doing to revolutionize this space. I am so blessed to know her. I got to know her through a mutual friend, and it's just a real privilege to have her on The Generous Girl. So thanks for joining, and I know you're going to love this conversation. In 2008, Jenni Lord created a ministry called Chosen. And as she says, it was the chosen before the chosen. And she empowers parents and caregivers to lead change in their homes through connection and attachment. Chosen works with adoptive, foster, kinship, and biological parents to provide practical tools to help their children heal and restore joy and peace in their homes. And Jenni believes that the power of connection brings healing to the broken places in our stories. She champions family healing through authentic connection, knowing that it is the key to helping children heal from relational trauma. She's committed to driving systemic change in child welfare, advocating for reforms that prioritize true well-being and not just physical safety. So it's such a joy to welcome you here today, Jenni. Thanks for being here.
Yes. Thank you so much for having me. It's great to see you again.
Oh, I know. You too. And we love tech when it cooperates with us and we can be in the same room over the internet.
Yeah, absolutely.
So you're in San Antonio. It's where you do your work. And we met in Southern California. And do a shout out to Kyle Circle, who first brought us together. He's like, you really need to know Jenni Lord. And when I attended that event and you spoke to the room, full of people in Carlsbad, telling them about the mission, the ministry of Chosen, and how they could get on board and just your statistics of success that you find in your nonprofit, I thought you need to be for sure on the podcast so that more people can hear of this great work that you're doing. So why don't we just start with how this initial idea in 2008 came to be and how you started and launched Chosen?
Great. Well, I love sharing the origin story, and I'll zoom back into the 90s before we get into 2008 and just tell you a little bit about the catalyst for how God led my heart into this ministry. I did have an idea in 2008 to launch Chosen, but it really started in 1995. I have a brother who came into our home through foster care, and his adoption took almost 5 years to complete. And so as I was a teenager, then I'm just telling everybody my age. I was a teenager, then he was a toddler, and seeing that in my formative years, looking at the child welfare system with a bird's eye view and seeing just how broken it was and how a system that's designed to help children heal often brings them harm.
Right.
God just broke my heart for the kids that were impacted in the system then. And I, was in college, and when I got out of school, fast forward a few years, and I had an idea to start a ministry that would help fund adoptions. That was where Chosen originally began. We did that for about 5 years. And it was in the middle of the 2000s when the church was really waking up to, we have a worldwide orphan care crisis, 160 million orphans worldwide at least. And then we've got a foster care crisis in our backyard. And so at that time, I had a 3-year-old, a 2-year-old, and a 1-year-old. So I had my hands full. I was really not trying to start a nonprofit or a ministry. I just wanted to help families who were willing to say yes to kids who needed homes. And we did that for about 5 years. And then in 2014, God allowed me to see just another aspect of the brokenness that these children were often facing. And we took a missional evolution at that point.
So when you were basically trying to raise dollars for these adoptions, just curious, did those come from mainly families or foundations, other orgs? Like how did you feel like the Lord provided that funding and generosity?
Well, it was really incredible. No, it was entirely through individuals or small business owners for the first several years. There were no foundations. It was just people's hearts being moved to support those who were saying yes to kids with hard histories who needed a safe, loving home. And we were building really teams to rally around those families, building community around those families who were saying yes, and people were giving out of a desire to bless those who were saying that yes, right? And so I did not have any traditional fundraising experience. It started off extremely grassroots. I think our first foundation gift was probably 6 or 7 years in.
Neat, though. So neat that you just took that step of faith. And on this podcast, we have the 5 pillars, and today we're looking at faith and family. And so often I hear stories like you're not experienced as this nonprofit leader. God calls you to do this. You're obedient to what he's calling you to do. But I'm sure if you look back, you think, wow, I'm glad I didn't even know what I didn't know then.
I often say you do not know what is on the other side of an obedient yes.
Yes, that's so true. So true. And yet, how beautiful that you can give all the glory to God for all that he's done through you. And here you are now at this whole other place with the ministry. So, okay, let's talk then about how you made this huge pivot and then what this 2.0 version looked like.
Yes. So in 2014, I learned that some families were dissolving their adoption and putting kids into another home or back into foster care. And that just really broke my heart. To experience that type of abandonment or that sense of abandonment for a child who feels like they're in a new family and then another loss, just really broke my heart. My brother's journey has been extremely difficult, and our family has experienced the effects of unhealed trauma ourselves and faced many of the extraordinary challenges that come from unhealed trauma. I can talk more specifics maybe later on, but having lived that, I just couldn't imagine a parent getting to the place where they feel like that's the only option. There's no condemnation for me because that has to be such a feeling of desperation. But for a child, we're called to protect those who are vulnerable and those who are innocent and to speak up for those who are vulnerable, right? And so I really wrestled with that challenge. And at the time, no one was really talking about dissolved adoptions. I didn't know that you could do that. And when I learned, I just told our very small team at the time, I said, I feel like we have a stewardship responsibility. Stewardship is one of our core values as an organization. We have a stewardship responsibility. We have called and advocated for these kids and called so many families into saying yes. And my question was, who is walking with them long-term to help their kids heal from what they've experienced and ensuring that the family stays together? And Kim, we couldn't find a great answer to that at the time. And so through prayer, we decided to make a shift into supporting families in just that way, helping kids heal and keeping families intact.
Well, it's such a niche because, a little bit similar to how you said yes, you have these amazing foster parents that say yes, but then really don't have any idea what they're getting themselves into. There are some resources out there, but I feel like the resources that you provide are just really transformational for these parents. And I love that with your ministry, that's your goal. You want to equip those foster parents and do things that others aren't doing for them so they can be the best parent of those children that they could be. So talk about how you were able to put together these materials. Did you work with a psychologist or, personal experience? Or because also please talk about just your stats, because that's what really grabbed me at that dinner was how unbelievable your statistics are with the families that are able to stay together going through what they're going through that you offer. Yeah,
absolutely. So when we first started, we looked for a model that we could replicate. We just said, who's doing this and doing it well? Couldn't find a great answer to that in 2014. And so we decided to create a model, and we piloted something that a foundation helped to fund that. And and you always learn a lot in pilots, right? So we were
Yes.
going to do a mentor model with lived experience, people who had been in the trenches, who had experienced the woes of trauma themselves as a family, both foster and adoptive parents who had a great deal of experience. We started with people that we knew, people that we trusted, and we put together a training program with the professionals that are best in class, if you will, including a psychologist. And we started that way, and we learned really quickly that families were needing far more than a volunteer mentor. They were needing clinical level services and trained services that were by trained professionals. And so we had to evolve that model into what it is today. And with a clinical underpinning and attachment theory, I can talk a little bit about that. We started a parent coaching model, and that coaching is really focused on just what you said, empowering parents and caregivers to be an agent of healing in their home. Kids don't heal in a therapy office. They may need therapy. I'm a firm believer. Counseling is important. And there are times when all of us may need counseling, and certainly kids who have experienced neglect, abuse, abandonment, loss, right? But the parent or caregiver in their life is with them the majority of waking hours. And as a parent, you need to be equipped, not just with trauma informed, but trauma responsive tools that are helping to build healthy relational connection. We believe that is fundamental to a child healing. Attachment theory says that children heal when they have attachment to a safe, loving caregiver. And to build attachment starts with building small incremental doses of connection with the child. But when you have a child who's in your home, who's experienced trauma, the way that manifests is typically through big behaviors. And Kim, you and I have had some conversation about raising kids, and we all know how difficult that is. When their behaviors are big and there's chaos in the home, I will be honest, like my first inclination is not to lean in and try to connect. My natural inclination is like, I want to make this stop as quickly as possible, and they need to leave or I need to leave. And with a child from trauma, that's not the way that we need to handle it. We have to lean in to build that connection, which is what calms behaviors down.
I remember you addressing that at that dinner, and I thought it's so true. And as a parent, it doesn't matter how much training, what kind of upbringing you had, anything, in the sense that parenting is not for cowards, for anybody. Whether you have one child, whether you have 20, whether they're biological, foster, it's a hard job as you are navigating helping this little one be all they were made to be, and all the things that are thrown at them in life, in school, when they go to the church group, whatever it is. It's just such a daily being there for them, the listening and everything. But like you're talking about, then a child goes through all the quote normal things of a childhood, and then you layer that with this huge, foundation of trauma that they went through often in those early years. And gosh, my heart just goes out to the little one who they don't know how to navigate it. And then, like you said, the parent sees these huge behaviors. They don't know what to do. Maybe they've got their own kids. Now this is their first foster child. Their other kids didn't act this way. And it is just a very challenging space to be in, especially when the person's trying to do something they felt called to do what they feel is right for this little one. And it's just not easy. So talk about, let's just say this foster parent is in that situation and they find chosen ministry. How do you equip them?
So our team, and just to clarify, we serve foster and adoptive parents as well as relative caregivers. We call that kinship. It kind of depends on what state you're in. But any caregiver who is working with a child, parenting a child that has experienced trauma, right? So I'll give you a real live example. We have a family who came to us. Their nephew had been in foster care in another state, and they found out that he was going to go back into foster care, and they wanted to prevent that. They had 3 boys of their own. And so they said, we'll take him. We don't want him to go back into the system. Mom had a long history of substance abuse, and there had been a lot of neglect. And so they knew what parenting a 10-year-old was like. They had a 10-year-old. Mm-hmm. They had an older child. So they're like, we've got 3 boys. We can throw another one in the mix.
Rodeo.
Right?
We've done this before. Yeah.
And they came to us, and it was not going well. It was extremely difficult to pick a child up from that situation and then put him in a completely different function, what we would call a functioning family, right? That looks very differently than what his normal is. And so when that family first came to us, we're not just doing a history of the nephew, we're also looking at the parents' history, because sometimes, unfortunately, that's contributing to the chaos in the home. A parent may have unhealed trauma of their own. So we're looking at that family history. And then we do some clinical assessments. We look at the child's trauma symptoms. How is that manifesting? Sometimes it's depression, anger, PTSD, anger, things that you would think accompany those sorts of challenges. And we look at parent stress levels as well as the protective factors in the home. We want to make sure that kids are safe. And that gives us a comprehensive picture of what's happening in the family. And then our team develops something called a trauma responsive action plan. That is the roadmap. We're going to walk alongside that family for 4 to 6 months, empowering the parents with the tools and strategies that they need to help their nephew heal. And so we did that with this family. We walked alongside them for about 6 months. And a couple of things that were really pivotal about their journey. One, he grew up doing orphan care work. And so he had his whole life had a heart for kids that were impacted by institutional settings, who had experienced abuse and neglect. He had served on the board of organizations who worked in our space. And so he was not a stranger to trauma, right? And then he said, having trauma every day, every hour in my home, like, we had no idea what we were signing up for. We also did not know how it was going to impact our boys and their sense of stable, secure home, right? And he was in the middle of the birth order, which, sometimes that complicates things, as you would imagine. And one of the things that Dad told me it was so profound for them was getting the language and tools to explain to their young boys the impact of trauma on the brain. There is an impact. And so he's not doing this because he hates you. He's not doing this because he's mad at you, but he's been hurt and he has these protective coping strategies to try to keep himself safe, right? So that was huge, to just give them the tools to, even as a family, navigate it together. Another thing that happened with that family that was really sweet, their nephew was, if you can imagine, he was lived in an interior world because that was safer than his environment. And so very shut down. And he was very artistic. And that was an outlet for him, was in his art. And so they fostered that, they supported that, but he would never show them his artwork because that's his private, safe world, right? And several months,
didn't want to be rejected if he shared it. Someone laughed at it.
Exactly. Right. Who knows why he was keeping it, but it was not something that that he was sharing. So he had been in the home for about a year, and they were at the school for a meeting with one of their other kids' teachers, and saw him in the hallway. And he was like, look what I just drew, like, just went up and like showed him. And the dad said to me,
oh, it gives me the chills.
It gives me chills, like, telling the story again. And it sounds so small. It may sound small to the listener, but like, for us, it was a major breakthrough in their relationship, because
Trust.
They've been pursuing his heart for a year and pursuing that connection and saying, we're not going anywhere, buddy. Like, we're for you. We're going to, like, they're demonstrating that over and over again. And so for him to allow them into his world was a major breakthrough in their relationship. And Dad told me, Jenni, I don't know that I would have recognized it if I hadn't been working on all of these things with your team and how to build connection, and even seeing what a breakthrough is. Because as a parent, we just, that would be like normal to us, but it was not normal for him. So that's an example of how we walked alongside of a family and just made serious breakthrough. And he's been in the home for about 18 months now. And he's likely not going to go back to mom. And they would support that. They have been supportive of mom getting healthy. She just hasn't been able to do that. And so, they told me recently, it's not perfect, but we're so far from where we first started and felt like they have the tools to keep going.
Wow, that's a beautiful story and a great example of how you come alongside a family. So do you ever connect these parents who are fostering a child or adopted a child or the kinship aspect with one another in support groups, like peer to peer?
We don't have support groups. We certainly do that and make introductions, as it comes up when people are looking for that community. If you have a child who has to go to residential treatment or is dealing with, scary behaviors or things that are, that could be criminal of nature, like sometimes you need to connect with others that are, and certainly we make that available when it's appropriate.
And then when a family comes and works with you, is that covered by donors' generosity, or is there a charge to the family and they have some skin in the game financially? How does that work as the listener is listening and maybe it's for their family, maybe they have someone they want to refer to you?
Great question. So we have a variety of ways that cover our services. We do have a sliding scale for families who have the ability to pay. Most of the families who come to us cannot. And so we're about 60% donor funded and about 40% of earned income. Earned income for us comes through contracts like with state organizations, with child placing agencies. We have a federal grant. Like there's some dollars that come in to support our work. But what we're doing for parents and families, and I know you asked to talk a little bit about statistics, what we're doing is not traditionally covered by Medicaid dollars. Okay. So that brings in some challenges with, this isn't just a reimbursement model for insurance as an example.
Right. Wow. But I love that you are able to partner with these federal and state agencies for additional funds. That's really exciting. One of my cousins has an autistic child, and they have a similar model with a huge operation called Benjamin's Hope in Michigan. And they're bringing in the state, federal, and the individual dollars to make this faith-filled environment available to others. So it's really great that we have those options in our country, I think, to do this type of work.
Yeah, people ask me, do you ever get pushback from the government being a faith-based organization? I'm like, no, never. They say, and I can say that unequivocally in every state, because one, we serve any family that comes to us. So faith is not a criteria. We see it as being the hands and feet of Jesus. It's a discipleship model. We're very forthright with being a faith-based organization. We're also going to respect someone's position. If they're not a person of faith, we can teach biblical concepts without a biblical address, right? So that's one thing. And the second thing is the state is very aware, like, we are not a good parent. And they also recognize that what we are providing has been missing in the system, because the entire system is organized around a child's physical safety. It's not focused around child and family well-being. There is a recognition that what we do is missing in order to have better outcomes for kids, to provide stability and permanency so that they're not moving unnecessarily.
Right. So what is your dream vision of scaling this organization? So it's available in every state. What would you, if someone just donated $10 million to you tomorrow, what would you do?
I love this question. So backstory.
You never know who's listening. You never know. It could be someone who goes, okay, this is being laid on my heart. I want to give. So I always like to use the podcast, not as a fundraising tool, but hey, if someone's listening and they feel called to pray for you, fabulous. If they want to volunteer their time, wonderful. And financially, those are all aspects of generosity. So I'm all about, hey, if we can be a conduit on this podcast for the incredible leaders like yourself to, reach more kids, let's do it.
So we are scaling the organization, and as Kim knows, and we have a telehealth model. So we're able currently to serve anybody, anywhere, and do that all the time. But about a year ago, we launched a content and training strategy, which is another source of revenue for us. We know that we can't build an organization fast enough to meet all of the needs out there, but we can certainly influence the way the work is being done and what we have found to be so successful with families. And so this content and training strategy, if somebody were writing a $10 million check, it would accelerate what is possible. What we know is that there's about 10 reasons that families come to us, and they're the same reasons every time. They're struggling with lying, stealing, manipulation, harmful behaviors like self-harm, or maybe they're acting out aggressively against mom and dad or other siblings in the home. So we know that the top 10 things, right? For something to scale of what we're doing, we would like to package and digitize what we're delivering to families. There's about 80% of that we could package where people could access that anytime they wanted, right? Online, draw it down. And then about 20% of the time, you need a coach. You need somebody who is like, how do I do this thing? I get it. It makes sense. How do I apply what you're teaching me in my home real time? And so those kind of dollars would accelerate that strategy to help us do that faster so that we could reach the people who need the help, who don't know that we exist. Unfortunately, about 80% of the families that come to us are in crisis. We don't want that, but that's the nature of, that's just one, people wait until the wheels are coming off. Unfortunately, there's so much shame and isolation that comes with these types of behaviors and challenges that I'm talking about. And so people wait until it gets really bad. If we were providing tools and resources, strategies, small, digestible, bite-sized tidbits for the parent who is struggling in the beginning, couldn't we avert the crisis down the road? We have the subject matter expertise to do this. So that's my big dream.
That is wonderful. And even, that person that feels like, hey, I've never been down this path, but I really want to explore what fostering looks like. Even at that point, when, helping to set that healthy degree of expectations of, here's what you're, I've kind of heard it compared to, like, you think you're going to Scotland and you find yourself in Sweden, and it's like all the rules don't apply. And your brain is just, I was ready for Scotland, but over in Sweden, I need a much warmer coat. It's a lot colder. It snows and it rains in Scotland, etc. And I think that happens we're just not with our expectations. If our expectations are lined up with, okay, this is not me. I'm not a bad parent. I've never done this before. So here are the things out the gate that you found to be these, tried and true practices that work. That would seem that maybe then they would be coming to you where there might be some crises, but not that moment of like, I did this 2 years ago, said yes, and I can't do this anymore.
Exactly. We want parents to feel like they can keep going. The number one thing that we hear from the parents that come to us is, this doesn't look like what I thought it was going to. And so my husband and I are served as foster parents. I work in the space. I've been connected to the space for 30 years. It was different. You learn one thing in training, but then when you have a 4-year-old that's flipping you off and cussing you out, like, okay, what do I do? I can't spank them. So that's off the table, right?
And your other kids are watching this and they wouldn't do that. They also know mom and dad don't allow that.
Right. And no one told you in training how to parent that. And like that incident actually happened with a mom that I know who ended up adopting a couple of kids out of foster care. But when in her first experience, that was her reality. And she said, there is no grid for bad language. That's all they know because that's what they were living in. And so how do I do that? How do I keep going and parent my 3 biological kids over here at the same time? Right. So yes, we help, families navigate from that incident to, the self-harm, running away type of behaviors as well.
Well, so much respect to anybody in this space who has said yes and embarked on a journey that is taking them places that they never envisioned going. And yet the Lord is with them and they have felt called to do this. And they're, like the starfish analogy, touching that one life. Who knows the ripples, the ramifications of what can happen as a result of their faithfulness, sacrifice, generosity. So super, super grateful for anyone listening who has said yes. I also want to talk about how your career then has come into your home as a parent, because you were talking about, because we always like to cover an aspect of, okay, Jenni's thriving now, leading this incredible organization, but there were times, or there was a season when it was super challenging. And I think that's what you'd like to share in that regard. So I think it'll be very inspiring to hear from you how you've been able to take all this knowledge and apply it personally to be a better parent.
Yeah. So back when we made that missional evolution, really in 2015, at the time, my kids have four biological children. My oldest was 10. I had 4 kids in 5 years. So they're real close together. And my husband and I have been now married for 20 years, but both of us come from just a lot of brokenness. There was a lot of dissolved marriages in our background with our own parents. And so I know the struggle of that brokenness. Mm-hmm. Even though I wasn't in the system, I have some of the pain that just comes from broken families, right? And even though my husband and I had been married for 10 years at the time, as we were, my question was, how do we help these families keep going? We didn't know the answer to that yet. And what I learned through attachment theory was healthy connection is what brings healing. So as I'm reading, researching, discovering, I'm looking at these resources, realizing I have been trying to outrun my brokenness in the way that I'm parenting, and it's not working. My strategies as a parent were really correction and control. If anybody listening have a strong-willed child,
I think everybody, whether they have 1 or 20 kids, there's got to be one in there.
When you pray for a world changer, that also means that you have to parent a world changer. And I didn't know about that part of the prayer, though. But, I was parenting what we had prayed for, and it was really, really hard. And I was struggling as a mom in my own home with my biological kids to build healthy connection, because my strategies were control and correction. And when, just like God is with us, right? He doesn't correct us like by trying to control us. He corrects us through connection. He's always pursuing our heart. Mm-hmm. And that's what we teach parents to do, is always pursue their child's heart, even when the child is spitting on them, cussing them out, running away from them, rejecting them out of protection for themselves. That's what we're teaching parents. But back in 2015, I was like, oh, I've got my own work to do here. Like, I'm trying to parent differently because I want different outcomes and results in my home, but it's not working. This isn't working well for me. And so, one, I had to do my own work through counseling to just examine, like, I had my own fragmented heart that needed to some work, right? And then I had to learn how to employ these connecting strategies like I'm talking about in my own home. And it did not happen overnight. The transformation with my kids did not happen overnight. And the transformation in me parenting in a connected way certainly did not happen overnight. But I have learned so much, one, from the Lord, 2, from my team, about parenting in a completely different way that I was never taught. Yeah. One, I didn't see it, but I didn't learn it at church either. And so just parenting in a very different way, like overcoming the adversity, one, of my childhood, for my husband and I to be able to say we're celebrating 20 years of marriage this spring, and to live in true, authentic, sweet relationships with all of my kids, like that. I mean, it's invaluable to me. And I think, had I not had that, like, I told my team, it was like a collision. It was like Jenni's life collided with Chosen's mission, and they became more integrated. Mm-hmm. And had that not happened, I don't know what life would look like for me today.
Mm-hmm. Do you have any books you would recommend that really helped you as you were learning how to parent with a more connected style relationship with your child or children?
Yeah,
like the Shepherding Your Child's Heart comes to my mind. It's one book.
The start of it for me was reading The Connected Child. And The Connected Child was Dr. Karen Purvis's work. It's, very renowned. It was major breakthrough at that time of just understanding the impact of trauma on the brain and then how to parent a foster adopted child who had experienced a traumatic history, how to parent them in a connected way. But when I was reading it, I just realized I don't have a healthy attachment style. I'm not pursuing my own children in a way that is connected because I'm using these strategies from my childhood that aren't working. And so that was that work, if you haven't, that book alone, that kind of leads you down another path of other books, but it's a great starting place.
Oh, no, thanks for sharing. Well, I mentioned before the Relationship 180 group here in Orange County it was founded by Milan Yurkovich and Kay Yurkovich, and their materials are based on the attachment theory, and How We Love is for adults, and then they have a version for kids, but they're pretty close in proximity to Saddleback Church, and they have offered to the Saddleback staff reduced fees on counseling for the staff, because a lot of times, you're giving everything to be in that ministry position and you need it the most, but there aren't the extra dollars to, take advantage of it. And so when we moved out to Southern California in 2000, we were super grateful because my husband was a pastor there, and we were able to, receive the counseling and as for our own marriage, as we were in that stage like you were. At that point, we had like a 6-month-old to 6-year-old, also 4 kids in the 5 or 6 years. And I think God is always sharpening us as iron sharpens iron. And whether he's using a marriage to do that, whether he's using a friendship, whether he's using a child, it's never static. And he's always wanting us to be more Christ-like, be more like his son, and be the best version of ourselves that he created. And he's so gentle. And once we learn one thing, we think, whew, I got through that. But then he's like, okay, now you're ready for the next thing that I want to show you. And it's not just this fire hydrant of here's everything you need to change, but it's the baby steps. And I like to compare it to like the Apple store, where you go in and they only spend an hour with you because they know your brain can only handle so much. And then, you're feeling pretty good. And then you go back and now you're ready for that next level. But well, thank you for sharing that. And I just think it's incredible what you're doing. You're pioneering just new work. And if anyone wants to find you, tell them how they would find your website or any other sites or books.
Yeah, so our website is chosen.care, and you can also follow me or connect with me on jennilord.com, and I'm active on LinkedIn and getting more active on Instagram. I'd love to connect with you.
Wonderful. Well, before we jump into the conclusion of, any book you're currently reading, Bible Verse Bargain, anything else you'd like to share that you didn't get a chance to say or wanted to say?
Yeah, I think 2 things. One, my heartbeat is really for the restoration of families. And I think that's God's heartbeat. Family was the first institution that he created in the garden, and he is for family. And what I'm talking about, living in a connected way relationally, is for every listener. You don't have to be fostering or adopting a child for this to resonate, because unfortunately we live in a very lonely society where we're missing authentic connection. And to healthy, I believe the power of connection can bring healing to the broken places in all of our stories, not just theirs, but all of our stories. Mm-hmm. And so when you're pursuing connection to be seen, heard, valued, and known, to make that person feel that way, it's transformative in your relationships. Totally. So that's one thing that I would say. And 2, if you know somebody who is struggling, we would love to connect with you and be a support to your family or their family to keep going.
Oh, thank you. I'm glad that you added those. Okay, book you're currently reading.
All right, I'm going to show it because it's such a fun cover. It's a hard topic, though. Live No Lies.
Oh, yes.
John Mark Comer. Yes. It is recognize and resist the 3 enemies that sabotage your peace. It is so powerful. Mm-hmm. And he is deep, but it is very digestible. So highly recommend.
Excellent. Excellent. Okay. And any life verse that you love?
So Kim asked me what my favorite verse was, and I was like, just one? I have lots of verses. Psalm 27 is my favorite psalm in the Bible, and there's several verses from that psalm that I love. But towards the end, it says, I would have lost heart unless I believed I would see the goodness of the Lord in the land of the living. Love that.
That's perfect. Yes, especially for what you're doing. Okay, and a bargain. You know, most of my guests, they fall on one side or the other. Oh, I don't care about bargains. I don't have time. Or I love bargains. So which one are you?
Oh man. Well, true confession, I'm not a big shopper. So I get shopping tips from my mom, who happened to send me this bargain. She was like, you can order your Lancome online. And she gave me this special link for a discount. I've been wearing Lancome certain products for years. And she sent it to me on Black Friday. I do not shop on Black Friday. And so I was like, just looked at the link real quick, and it was like 30 or 40% off. So I was like, oh yes, put that in my cart. So 2 tips, Lancome or IT Cosmetics, or maybe your favorite, I don't know, but connect with them online. Then they'll send you text and you'll get all the bargains.
That's good. That is really good. You're saying go to the Lancome site and give them your email? Just the general company Lancome?
Well, I don't quote me on that, because I might be wrong, but because she sent me a link, like there's like the inside scoop, but maybe I can send it to you and you can share.
Oh, I love that. Oh, and that makes me think of another tip is, like, if you're going to a mall or a Nordstrom or wherever, I don't know about Sephora, but at least if you're going to, say, like a Macy's or Dillard's, where, they're going to have all the counters represented, they usually, when you buy that foundation, if you ask them for a travel size, they'll give you extra in that and fill it up. And, you've just found out the color you want, and they just use the same one, fill it up. And that, I love traveling with those because they're tiny and they last a long time. So I'm going to add that tip to your tip.
I love that. And Sephora does do that, by the way.
Oh, they do? Okay.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah. Good to know. Good to know. Well, thank you, Jenni. Thank you for your generosity and being here today. God bless you. And I can't wait to keep following you and your ministry and all that is coming out of San Antonio, Texas, that's going to change the world. So thanks again.
Kim. I really appreciate it. Thanks so much.
God bless.
Thanks so much for joining us today on the Generous Girl podcast. We're so glad that you're here. And if you know of someone that you think needs to be a guest on this podcast, please reach out to us. New episodes are released every other week, and you can follow us on YouTube and on all platforms. Thanks for being here, and we'll see you next time.